Hello and welcome to tv.falafel.com. This is Lino Tadros, and this video is about making a web service client call from Android on the device. So first of all, I want to take you to this website, code.google.com/p/KSOAP2-Android. If you wanted to make these calls pretty simple, just go ahead and download this first. Click on the download page, and there is a jar file for the KSOAP2 Android assembly available right here. Once you download this on your machine, we'll be able to use it in Eclipse to make this happen. All right, I already downloaded this earlier. I'm gonna go into Java Eclipse here. I'm gonna create a brand new project and for Android. We'll call it, for instance, my test. Great name. And you can actually, I'm going to use the latest. You can choose the Android 2.1, which is the latest one as of today, or you can use the Google API version number 7 here, the API 7. The difference between them, as you might know, if you need to actually have anything to do with the Google APIs like maps or anything above and beyond what Android has on the device itself, so they are pretty close, except the extra stuff from Google will be involved in here, like maps and voice and all that good stuff. I usually like to use Google APIs. It includes everything from the Android 2.1 as well. All right, for the application name, we'll call it my test. It's not that important for this example. Package name, we'll call it com.falafel.mytest. And my activity here, usually the activity is the name of the screen. So let's start, for instance, the first one with first screen right there. I'm not going to use any testing for this stuff. And now it will generate all the files necessary for my project called test. So there is my source file, firstscreen.java, and I have everything I need in here to make this stuff work. And that is my Android manifest of XML. We will need to come in here later on to see how to enable access to the internet. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. The important part is, of course, to go to my test in here, right click and go to properties, and we'll go to the Java build path. And under libraries in here, you'll notice we don't have access to that external jar file. So I'm going to add the external jar file for the KSOAP2. And there it is here, KSOAP2. I'm just going to go ahead and double click on this guy, and we have it included. That's the only thing I needed to do to bring in this jar file so that my project can have access to KSOAP for my project. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look what we're going to call. There is actually a .NET based web service available out there. It's at www.w3schools.com web services. It's a temperature converter. It's an ASMX, it's a .NET, ASP.NET web service. And it has two functions, one that translates Celsius to Fahrenheit and one from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So you can actually take a look at the web description, actually the WSDL file. Let's say view the page source in Chrome, and you'll see the entire file is right in here. That's an important piece because you'll be able to tell the type, for instance, it's taking in the parameter as strings and returning a string. So you would expect these would be integers or doubles or something, but it's not. It's actually taking strings. It doesn't really matter. It's just to show you how the stuff will work. So this is good enough. So I'm interested, of course, in the URL where the ASMX itself in here. So we're going to need that, and I need the signature of the function, which is Celsius to Fahrenheit. And I know it takes one parameter of type string, and it returns a string. We just found this out. We can click on the Celsius to Fahrenheit, for instance, and I can see that there is a SOAP 1.1 and SOAP 1.2 implementation for it. The SOAP action would be important for me, so I can see that it's using the tempura.org as the namespace, and it has the Celsius.Fahrenheit is the continuation of the SOAP action itself. So all the stuff is information that I'm going to need, like the SOAP action, the namespace, the URL, and the method name, of course. All these will be important for me to make the call from the Android website. Now let's go back to Eclipse in here, and I'm going to make very simple changes actually to my layout. I'm not going to do any major UI changes or anything like that. The only thing I'm interested in here for my UI, for my layout, is to use a text view. Very simple in here. I will put one right there. We'll have a text view 01 is fine for me. And with that, I'm going to save all, and I'm going to go back to my code in here. All right, so the important part for me is that when I'm going to start writing code against this, this UI, that I know that I have a text view 01. Of course, you can change the IDs and everything that you want. I'm going to keep it as simple as possible in here. First of all, there are some imports that you will need to bring in. I'm going to bring them in here for you. Let's go ahead at the bottom of this. I'm going to bring in, oops, that's an extra one right there. Okay, I'm going to bring in the org KSOAP 2 for the SOAP envelope, for the SOAP object, for the SOAP primitive, SOAP serialization envelope, and the Android HTTP transport. So once you bring in these 5 or 6 different imports from the namespaces, you'll be ready to go with that kind of stuff. Also, because I use the text view, let's also make sure that we can get to it right away. I'm going to include the import for the widget for text view as well. And now let's go ahead into my inside of the class for the first screen that extends the activity. I'm going to go in here and then bring in 4 lines. Hopefully they will make sense to you. I'm going to create some private static finals for my SOAP action, for the method name I'm trying to call, for the namespace, and for the URL. So these are definitely important, and this syntax is definitely the way you will need to do this. The SOAP action itself will point to where the namespace is / the name of the function, and the method name is, of course, the Celsius to Fahrenheit is exactly the same name of the function you're trying to call. The namespace in our case in here for this specific one is the tempuri.org. The URL is very important. You are pointing to the ASMX, not the WSDL file. Make sure that this URL is pointing to where the complete URL, to where the service itself is. Okay, this is not the WSDL file. You probably notice this red line in here, and that's usually something that happens when you create a project for the first time, and there is an import android.r all the way in the beginning in here. So your best bet is just to go ahead and delete this line. If you delete this line, this will make it go away. So we'll go ahead and say save all, and you'll be able to compile this project. We'll say build project, and it's all good. You'll notice there is some warnings definitely because I'm importing all these different namespaces and all the static final strings that I haven't used yet. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in here and create a text view instance of a variable. Here we'll say TV, for instance. Okay, I'm going to use this variable that I'm declaring in here later on. Okay, what I wanted to do is to go ahead and find from my main.xml. Notice I created one called textview01. I could create whatever name I wanted in the UI for the layout. But in here, I'm going to actually go cheat and get a line of code that will actually find the view by ID from our XML. So I'm going to come in here. We'll do this on the onCreate. I'm going to do the whole work on the onCreate. I'm not going to create any buttons or listeners or anything like that, just to make sure you understand how simple it is to do this all at once in your own application. So with this line of code in here, we'll assign the text view 01 from the resources of the main.xml to our variable for text view TV right there. Okay. Now I'm going to just concentrate in the next few lines of code on the SOAP portion of this entire thing. So the first line that I'm going to use is the SOAP object. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a SOAP object request equals new instance of the SOAP object, and I'm going to be passing the namespace and the method name. The namespace in case here will be the tempuri.org, which I got from my WSDL, and the method name will be the Celsius to Fahrenheit. Alrighty, if Celsius to Fahrenheit was a function that doesn't take any parameter, for instance, I would be done with my request at this point. But in our example, the Celsius to Fahrenheit does take a parameter, and that parameter is actually Celsius. It's a string parameter being passed in. So request is not enough just to pass the namespace and the method name. I will need to actually package this whole thing with all the parameters being passed in. And the way to do that is you will add a property to your request, give it the name of the parameter, which is Celsius, and then here you'll notice that I'm hard coding the value, which is 32. I can pass whatever I want, and here I just chose 32. This usually is a variable that you will allow from the user interface in the main.xml for your end user to be actually entering a number, and then you will be taking that variable in to show them what they want to convert to Fahrenheit inside of the user interface. Okay. What happens if the function, for instance, for Celsius.Fahrenheit takes 2 or 3 different parameters? You will end up calling a request of add property 2 or 3 times, and each time you'll pass it the name of the parameter and the value that you want to pass it. So you'll package the whole thing in the request in here. So that's 1/3 of the work. So 1/3 is actually creating the request itself and all its parameters. Then the second portion is the subserialization envelope itself, and that's an important piece of what needs to happen in KSOAP to call web services inside of Android. And you'll notice here from the code, I'm creating an instance of the SOAP envelope here, which is of type SOAP serialization envelope. And the main thing during the call or the initialization of the constructor in here is that you decide which version of the SOAP specification you want to use for the serialization. In our case in here, I chose the SOAP 1.1. You can actually pass SOAP envelope version 12, which is SOAP 1.2. It all depends on how your server was the service itself was created and how you want to actually call into it. So you have available the version 11 or 12 based on the source specification 1.1 or 1.2. The next line of code is extremely important. I've noticed on the forums for Android developers, there's a lot of people are having problem with this because they are not aware of it existing. You will need to set the .NET property to true on the SOAP envelope itself. Notice that our service is an ASMX, that's a .NET based ASP.NET web service. And if you do not make that call for SOAP envelope.NET equal to true, you might be able to see some errors regarding the objects being null inside of the request itself. So this is not the case, of course, if you're using PHP or Java or any other type of services, but for .NET, it's important to set SOAP envelope.NET equal to true. And the tricky part is that sometimes it will work. So this is a pretty tough thing to debug because for some people, depending on what they're calling inside of this web service, you will need to set the SOAP envelope.NET equal to true or not. If you know it's a .NET one, just be safe and just make the call for the property of .NET to be always set to true. And finally, for the SOAP envelope, I am going to go ahead and set the set output SOAP object and passing the request. So the first third of the job is to package the request, and the second third of the job is to set the SOAP serialization envelope, set it to .NET, and package the entire request we got from the first 2 lines in there and pass it in to the SOAP envelope itself. All right. Now the final third of our work, and that's to actually set the transport, the HTTP transport itself. So you will notice here from my code, I'll bring in the extra line of code in here. I'm creating an instance variable called AHT. It's based on Android HTTP transport. You don't really have to use this one. This one comes from the KSOAP 2, as you can see, for transport, Android HTTP transport. You can use HTTP transport SE, and that will work just fine. This one comes with KSOAP 2, so you might actually want to use it as well. It takes the URL, which is the name of the ASMX, the URL for the ASMX itself. Remember, this is not where the WSDL is. This is where the real service is, not is WSDL. Okay. And the only thing left for this code, I'm going to actually bring in some code here for the try catch block to actually make the call. So let's go back in here, and I'm going to paste some code. And I want you to be very careful with the code as it's being called right now. This is really where the most important line of code in this entire onCreate event in there. When you do the aht.call and pass it the SOAP action, which will be the namespace appended by the name of the function, the SOAP envelope, which is the second parameter here, is an in and out parameter. In and out parameter means that the SOAP envelope has a body in and a body out for the entire envelope in XML going back and forth. And once you decide to actually make the call, it already knows the URL it's going to. It knows the request is packaged inside of the SOAP envelope. It knows the SOAP serialization because that's what the request also is available inside of the SOAP envelope. So all the stuff is available in the in portion of this whole SOAP envelope. But once the call is successful, the SOAP envelope also contains the response coming back. So after this aht.call gets called, SOAP envelope contains a response object inside of it that gets the response back as a SOAP envelope as well. Okay, so again, this is the most important part of the entire 10 lines of code in here. The next line is a SOAP primitive. Notice also SOAP primitive is available in the KSOAP 2 in here, just to make it simple for people to get the results back, especially as it says, it's a SOAP primitive. That means if this is a string, integer, double, boolean, or something as simple as that, you're more than welcome to use SOAP primitive to actually get the response, and it will typecast the SOAP primitive to be able to get to it, like I'm doing here for the text view, setting the text and passing the result string. You will be able also not to use SOAP primitive if you would like. You can use a string array, for instance, and get the get property 0, which is the first element that will be coming back from the response. You can do it however you'd like. There is different ways. You can use a SOAP object, you can use strings, you can use SOAP primitive. There will be some typecasting, and you'll have to be careful with that stuff. In future videos, we're going to go through a little bit more complex examples for complex type when you are returning back an object, not something like a string or an integer or something like that. When you have a whole object coming back, how to deal with that stuff, we'll see this in future videos. For right now, this is the important part. We set the request and all its parameters, package it together in one request object, and then we use the SOAP serialization envelope in here. And then finally, we use the Android HTTP transport to make the call straight to the server and get back the response. And if everything is successful, we will be able to see it inside of the UI. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if this will actually work for us. I'm going to go ahead and build this project. And I actually have already the emulator running, because usually it takes like 30 or 40 seconds for the emulator to start, so I didn't want you to wait for that. Let's go ahead and run the application in my emulator and see how it works. When I'm expecting this, when it actually runs, I'm expecting it to fail, to be honest with you. And hey, look at that, it did fail. It says false. I have no idea what false means. I told it here to show me set text status colon and give me hopefully a number. That's what I got back from the web service call. So there is no exception. Of course, if you debug this, you will find out that it actually ran straight into the catch right after the call. And the reason for it is, folks, my Android application in the manifest file, which is the Android manifest.xml in here, there is no way in here that I told it to respect the internet call. That means it will not allow you to make internet calls inside of this application. So the way to actually get around that, and I notice this is also a lot of questions on the forums about this, why is it not working? It doesn't give you any information about that. You will have, after the closing of the application, for instance, you can have users permission, and you have to have the android.permission.internet available right inside of your code, inside of the XML file for the Android manifest. Without this, unfortunately, it will not allow you to make an outside call on this guy. Okay, let's go ahead and run it one more time, and we'll run it in the Android again and see if this time it hopefully will give us the correct answer. And if everything works correctly, it should say status, and there we go. It took to 32 in Celsius, it's 89.6 in Fahrenheit. So my web service worked just fine. All right, hopefully this was easy enough for you to take a look at what it would take to actually make a very simple call into a .NET-based web service written in ASP.NET. And again, you will need to set up the SOAP object for the request. You need to set the SOAP serialization envelope itself, and then make the most important call in here that will take an in and out parameter for the SOAP envelope. And then you can manipulate all your UI however you'd like based on whatever result you're getting back from the GET response, from that SOAP response. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope it was useful to you. Please visit tv.falafel.com to see our future videos as well on the subject. And I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.